So, welcome everyone to the 8th session in the Rubix Knowledge Series. We're very fortunate to have two fine young gentlemen with us today, Raunaq Vaisoha and Sahil Kathpal, and I'll talk a little bit about them in a moment. We are going to be talking about blockchain for your business, a key buzzword that all of us hear about, but getting an understanding of the nuts and bolts of blockchain, its applications for your business, and differentiating the hype from the truth is what we're going to try and do today. And no one better than Raunaq and Sahil for this. Both of them are co-founders of Elemential Labs, which is a Mumbai-based startup backed by notable investors such as Matrix Partners, Lightspeed Venture Partners, the digital currency group DCG, the Hinduja Group, 8i, and several notable angel investors. Elemential offers the administrative tools for blockchain with the goal of minimizing the technical risk for teams looking to implement it at scale. Their customers include the National Stock Exchange, NSDL, that's the depository, SEBI, CAMS, ICICI Bank, and several players in the BFSI space. Raunaq started his entrepreneurial journey back in university at HR College in Mumbai. He was introduced to blockchain through trading cryptocurrency way back in 2013. And he has a strong passion for technology and financial markets. He's been recognized in the Forbes 30 under 30 list for enterprise technology for Asia. And he was always, he was also the youngest on the Entrepreneur India 35 under 35 list, making it onto the list while he was only 23. Sahil has been a passionate developer and got his entrepreneurial start while in university at TSEC. He is amongst the core contributors to the Tendermint protocol, which was a pioneering technology to improve the speed and efficiency for private blockchain. He brings a deep passion for problem solving to their clients at Elemential. He is also recognized in the Forbes 30 under 30 list for enterprise technology in Asia. Together at Elemential, they worked with the most reputed organizations to build and deploy pioneering use cases. This includes the world's first live KYC sharing on blockchain for NSE and CERSAI, which saw participation from 9 banks. The world's first live e-voting on blockchain for NSDL and SEBI, which was implemented for the AGM of a public listed company. They've also worked on several pilot projects with players in the digital lending space and the financial market space. So we are very glad to have both of you on this session, Blockchain for Your Business, and we hope that you help us understand it better. We're sure you will. As a preliminary comment, I'd just like to say I got to know Raunaq many years ago when we were both attending a session at the Indian Merchants Chamber. And I was so impressed by his, and he was a college student then, and I was so impressed by him that I asked him to come and intern with us at my previous organization, mainly because we wanted to learn from him. So I said reverse mentoring, and we were very fortunate to and I got from him personally. I also, as a full disclosure, a very small investment in Elemential. Very small because he wouldn't let us invest more because he had all these marquee partners. So very little left for us, but very happy to have made that small investment, and that's for full disclosure's sake. With that, let's get started on the questions for today. We have lots of folks like me on the call, guys, who have heard of blockchain, who have a fuzzy understanding of it. We know it's going to change the way we do business, but we don't really know what it is. How do you define and explain blockchain to a layperson?
So I think to begin with, thank you so much for having us on this webinar. I really appreciate the opportunity and really appreciate the opportunity to share whatever learnings we have We work primarily in the BFSI space, so with financial markets companies, but sort of we have a deep understanding of blockchain. So hopefully you should be able to share that across a couple of use cases. So now I think when we look at what is blockchain, there are various ways to define it. The way I like to look at it is it's basically a decentralized ledger that allows like a network of participants to process their own transactions, right? So thereby enabling them to disintermediate any middleman to a transaction. So this is useful because sometimes there are central intermediaries that are either slow or expensive, and that tends to slow down business or add to unnecessary costs. So, in the blockchain world, you're already seeing, for instance, if you look at, the corresponding bank network, or you look at remittances, a lot of banks used to use Swift, and they use Swift majority. But a lot of banks are also investing in the Ripple protocol, right? Because they see that as a way to process their own cross-border transactions and do it faster and cheaper. So I think blockchain brings this new operating philosophy of decentralization, which, while not applicable to everything, to certain network use cases, it can add a lot of efficiency and save a lot of costs. Although it was originally designed to be a registry for Bitcoin, we're now seeing it become a registry for all kinds of assets.
Right. Sahil, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Raunaq's put it really well. Like the whole concept of a decentralized ledger for any and all assets. That's, in fact, yeah, I think I'll add a little bit to that. That apart from being a ledger, it started off as a ledger for Bitcoin, but today it's become like a platform for even state management for different businesses. When
Right.
different participants or even stakeholders in a single process, it becomes very important to manage state across this entire process. Which in fact, I think I'll even speak about supply chain
Right.
a little later.
Right.
Blockchain's gone from being just a ledger for transactions to a lot more now.
Correct. Okay. Whenever blockchain comes up for discussion, there is always some mention, and we already heard it, a mention of digital currencies such as Bitcoin. Why is blockchain so fundamental for digital currencies? Also, do you think that digital currencies such as Bitcoin are here to stay, despite the fact that they're not fiat currencies backed by the central banks and governments? Raunaq, I know you've been an investor, so I'm going to ask you that.
Yeah, so I mean, my first love in the space was Bitcoin. That's kind of how I got introduced to blockchain. See, blockchain is the innovation. Bitcoin was the first use case. So the way I look at it is, so there was a group of people, a person, we don't know who, this guy Satoshi Nakamoto. And in 2009, he had a dream of creating an internet currency. A way of being able to transact peer-to-peer across the internet without needing a fiat currency, without needing to pay fees, without need, just a very efficient way to transact across the internet. And he hit one challenge consistently, which was, okay, if I create an internet currency, it's going to be a digital file. Now, how do I prevent that digital file from being duplicated and replicated, and how do I prevent fraud? So I need some way of tracking ownership. Now, if that person who tracks ownership is one individual, then that individual will eventually be corrupted, right? And he might try and make transfers in ways that aren't beneficial to the network. So that's why he kind of made the blockchain, which was a decentralized way wherein there was maximum incentive to stay truthful through cryptography, right? So that's kind of the blockchain use case was essentially first Bitcoin, and now it's moved on to other things. And as for, whether it's going to replace fiat, I don't think so. I think according to many legal reports that I've been reading, a lot of people look at it as a commodity from a legal perspective.
Right. So you are definitely saying that it is not going to replace fiat, but it has its uses. Just as an aside, still a good time to invest in Bitcoin. I know you still trade in it, so.
If you sort of believe in the fact that there'll be more cross-border trade happening, more people selling stuff at an individual level rather than a wholesale level, which you already see, right? Like a lot of people who buy stuff off of Shopify from stores in the US and London and all kinds of places. So if you believe in the global economy, then you should believe in Bitcoin because it's the only currency that, or only mechanism that will scale with the internet. So I think that's the way to look at it. But it has no inherent value. One should also recognize that, right? It has a price because it's limited in supply. So economically, it has a price, but it doesn't really have an inherent value.
Well, you could say the same about banknotes as well, but that's a separate discussion on economics 101. So we won't go there. One of the greatest attributes about blockchain is that it enhances trust. Why and how does that happen? Would you want to share an example or two of how trust increases because of blockchain in a business setting?
Sure.
You want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So, interestingly, blockchain was called the trust machine by The Economist a while back. And so before I even get into why and where blockchain creates trust, I'll actually talk about the setting where it's even required. I'm talking about processes where there are separate entities that need to work together. This could be multiple stakeholders in the same process like supply chain, or it could be competitors needing to work together and share data in cases like, lenders needing to work together for avoiding credit risk. Now, in these kind of situations with a centralized system, you're going to need a central server that has the power to make sure that everything is as intended and the terms are being met. This one entity is going to have a lot more power than the others, and hardly ever are the other participants going to be okay with that. In fact, this paradigm we've seen even before digitization came in, like for any process that existed even on paper. And this led to the emergence of the concept of a trusted third party. Now, when you bring blockchain in, you understand that blockchain being a decentralized technology has no master. But that then creates the question that how do I bring in accountability? If I am not giving this power to one entity, who's going to enforce that my terms are being met? And there are two very fundamental characteristics of blockchain that let you do just that. I'm talking about the append-only nature of blockchain and smart contracts. So data, when it's being written to the blockchain, once written cannot be modified. Now, I'll just on a very high level touch the technical aspect of this. This is because data, that any new data that's being written to the blockchain is linked using hashes to all old data that's existed on the blockchain, right up to the very beginning of the blockchain.
Right.
This means that if I want to modify any data at any point on the blockchain, I'm going to need to recalculate these hashes and modify them all the way back to the beginning. And this is computationally going to be a very expensive thing to do. And even if somebody were to attempt this, you would still need all the other participants to accept these changes, because I can't make these changes only on my copy of the blockchain. It's distributed. Everybody needs to agree.
Right. Right.
So we're basically ensuring that no data can be manipulated or modified. Now, of course, when updates need to legitimately happen, you can do that because this new data is going to be appended to the data store. So as a collateral advantage, what you see is that you have a complete audit trail of every iteration of the data from the beginning to today.
Which is critical for workflows, right? I was about to ask you that. It becomes very important for workflows, traceability in that sense, right?
Yes. So that's the append-only nature of blockchain. And then smart contracts, on the other hand, make automation more trustworthy. So with a smart contract, once all the players agree on a piece of code and it's uploaded to the blockchain, no one entity can change it without having the others on board. And even when this code runs, it's actually running simultaneously on every machine of every participant in this network. So no one person can make changes to the code on his end and expect to pass the doctored results as truth without question from the others. So what you end up seeing here is that blockchain makes sure that data is verified in real time because of smart contracts, and data once written cannot be modified. So, and that's because of the append-only nature of blockchain. I'll in fact take an example here. We spoke about e-voting a little while back as well. So recently, in fact, just before the lockdown, we successfully ran a publicly traded company's AGM on the blockchain. Now, electronic voting today happens using a third-party platform that's usually run by service providers like NSDL. And here, these platforms are not just providing convenience for the shareholders and company, but they're actually expected to do critical tasks like manage the security of the collected votes and even run sensitive operations like collecting these votes and actually counting these votes and reporting them to regulators like SEBI.
Right.
Now, if I were to bring blockchain into the picture, one thing I have out of the box is the fact that all the collected and recorded votes cannot be tampered with by anybody.
Correct.
Whether the platform, whether the company, even the regulator for that matter. So that's an advantage right there. But there are still two gaping security loopholes here, which is how do I ensure that when I'm collecting the data, things are in order, and when I am counting the votes, there is no malfeasance happening here.
Right.
Smart contracts here solves both of these. By involving SEBI, we can ensure that the correct code is running with the correct rules at all points. Because SEBI, or rather SEBI system, is also running this code in conjunction with the platform. So what we also saw is that SEBI could keep the entire process in check while making sure that none of the data is being manipulated.
Right.
So there was a lot more transparency than could have existed. And what you end up seeing is that this third-party platform now becomes a platform of convenience and is no longer a point of attack or failure.
Right.
So, just to summarize, I think Kaushal, what you said about blockchain enhancing trust, I think I'd rather rephrase it as blockchain takes away the need to trust others that you're doing business with.
Okay. That's a philosophy right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
What the system is just doing for you, in fact, it's acting like an impartial computer program that ensures that everybody is following the rules that we've agreed upon. So there is no place for any malfeasance or malicious behavior.
Okay, I think I like that definition. So it takes away, it enhances trust by taking away the need for trust.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good way to look at it. Another key attribute about blockchain that I have found fascinating is, or it's a benefit, is traceability. Now let's talk about it in current times. The global food supply chain. The World Health Organization estimates that nearly 420,000 people, 420,000 people die every year due to food contamination. And blockchain can help promote safety by tracing the entire life cycle of food products. Similarly, it's there for garments, etc. Origin, even diamonds, you don't want blood diamonds or conflict diamonds. Can you throw some light on how this works?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just start off by mentioning there's one use case in particular which I thought was really interesting, which was by Tata Trust. It was done with the AP government and it was around shrimp farming. And one issue with the shrimp farming industry in India is that, at least from this state, about 60% of the shrimp exports get rejected because of some use of antibiotics in the farming process and stuff like that. So the government was looking to enhance trust for farms by being able to trace where exactly the shrimp is coming from and weed out the bad actors. So Tata Trust spun up the blockchain and essentially managed the provenance all the way from like farm to table, you can say. And we're seeing this same use case apply to a lot of different places where there can be a complex supply chain and you want to simplify the trail of the supply chain. So there's another company called Everledger, which is doing it with De Beers for diamonds.
Right.
And there are quite a few use cases around provenance. Sahil, if you want to expand on that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, that a collateral advantage of the whole append-only nature of blockchain is a complete audit, and that plays a key role for traceability. Especially with the food use case you spoke about, Kaushal, traceability is very, very important for ensuring the food quality. Especially knowing where this is coming from, what conditions is it stored in, and what conditions is it even transported in. And this traceability needs to be a lot more than simple reporting for it to be effective. You need, because what you understand is that it's not just informing people of what this food is stored in or what conditions it comes from. because there is incentive to lie in supply chain.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think as a solution here, automation is key. You want to take out the human element here. In fact, we can see that with the advent of e-commerce, traceability has seen a lot of innovations. In fact, companies like Amazon have really improved their tracking of their goods using automation and IoT. Here, even when you automate though, you need a system that's going to be impartial, is going to follow rules, and is going to make sure that no human element can come and manipulate your data. You can see how I'm bringing blockchain into the picture here.
Correct. Correct.
So, so when you're looking at traceability, you want to use blockchain to ensure that the data is safe once recorded, and you want to ensure that smart contracts are coded in such a way that they are only going to accept data from certain sources.
Right.
That still leaves the problem of the veracity of the data sources themselves.
Exactly. I was about to ask you. Yeah.
And there you can use IoT. So you can have IoT set up to track and record the temperature, the humidity, and other such conditions of the food as it is being stored or transported. Even tracking what all places the food is passing through. For example, with the Tata Trust use case that Raunaq just spoke about, it's very important to have a record of what treatment plants the shrimp have gone through. Because
Correct.
the reason of rejections in their exports has been that the shrimp has been treated with antibiotics. And knowing that this data is coming from IoT, again, without human intervention, and it's recorded on a blockchain where once it's recorded, it can't be manipulated, will give the recipient of this data, the importer, a lot more confidence to know that what he's looking at is true. And in case he does spot that the shrimp has passed through treatment centers that have been known to use antibiotics, it is now easier for him to take calls. So this year, I mean, traceability is going to need like a lot of technologies in conjunction. It's not purely blockchain. It's not purely digitization. It's not purely IoT, but it has to be a mixture of all three. What you want to do is take away the human element of fraud here.
Right. So what you're saying is that blockchain working with adjunct technologies can do this. It becomes very critical, right? So your GI, the geographical indication that you get for a Darjeeling tea or a Bordeaux wine, or what have you. I believe that in the future, blockchain will play a role of that along with other technologies to be able to say that this is genuine Darjeeling tea and it is not the transaction is for genuine Darjeeling tea and it is not just since you're having tea. It's not just some ordinary tea which is being sent at those expensive prices, right? So I think traceability, provenance, has Raunaq called it, and provenance I think is beginning to become a big issue across the world, across a set of commodities, both agriculture and also right now I think you're seeing a lot of it in pharma. The extent of fraud that we're seeing right now around products that are supposed to be, used in the battle against coronavirus, and they all have claims and they all claim to be from this particular, a particular plant or made using a particular technology, which has a fabric, it could be a mask. A lot of it is proven to be just completely untrue. And I think that when used, blockchain, when used in conjunction with some of these things, can help us battle these things critically if it's done well. There's lots of questions coming in, some on supply chain and logistics. We have several folks from supply chain and logistics companies on the call as well. So blockchain is playing a key role in supply chain management by digitizing and automating the workflow and even the paperwork across the entire supply chain, across borders, cross-border. And this is happening in real time. Anything that any insights that either of you can share on this basis your experience, the supply chain use case? Raunaq?
Yeah, in fact, I'll take this. We've actually explored the use case a little while back for this very paperless digital process of paperwork for supply chain across borders. And what we realized is that digitization is only part of the solution here. There are so many stakeholders involved, and the goods themselves and information about the goods changes hands at so many times and so frequently that even with digitization, what you see is that the information gets lost and there is lost transparency. There is a lack of synchronization between all the stakeholders, and this leads to the fact that you end up requiring more paperwork at borders. There's more verification required, and you end up with a lot more bureaucracy than you wanted in the first place.
Right.
Now, if I was to bring blockchain into the picture here, blockchain being a decentralized but synchronized ledger makes sure that every participant and every stakeholder in this process at any level has the ability to write to it. And what you end up with is a single source of truth that's verifiable and holds every member that's writing to it accountable for the data they provide. Now, this single source of truth is giving you complete transparency, it's giving you complete accountability, and this can make it a lot easier to verify and in fact have the data be a lot more trustworthy at borders, and you can deal with compliance a lot better. You're meeting the compliance requirements much better. Even if I was to just digitize the process, and mind you, there are a lot of service providers that are building and have already built services for digital bill of lading, for digital, a lot of these documents that let you meet customs digitally. But verification is still a problem. I am still a third-party source of truth that is collecting data from different people at different times and does not have a system that is inherently going to be able to prove that this data is the truth. So you would still require a lot more verification than you would with blockchain. So we've right now just moved from a paper-based, completely offline system to a digital system. We are yet to move to a real-time verified system, which I believe blockchain can bring here.
I think I love that last phrase again, the last sentence, real time and verified. Verification and real time, I think that's very critical because there's a lot of inefficiency and friction that gets created in supply chains at borders, right? And when things are passing, because, it has to be, a lot of it has to be machine matched, it has to be done manually, but it's still a process. Whereas here, because you have, as you said, a single version of the truth, about that particular shipment or that transaction, I think it just becomes a lot easier. But it will take governments to accept that, right? On both sides of that border.
Yeah.
So any thing that you guys have come across or read about how governments are opening up to blockchain?
So I know that IBM has done a lot of work with Maersk when it comes to managing some supply chain documentation on blockchain. As far as I can tell, I think the governments are very keen to experiment with blockchain all across. Like I know that Niti Aayog, which is a government think tank, it's literally published its own vision for blockchain in government. And pretty much initially it was a lot of central banks doing that. But today you're just seeing all kinds of sort of regulators stepping up and trying to implement blockchain. As Sahil rightly mentioned, it helps you move from just a digital state to a real-time verified state. And that only sort of benefits the regulator because it helps business move faster, helps GDP. And I think it's something that is crucial, especially now in the post-COVID time, is that we need to reduce bureaucracy. And we need to speed up business processes, especially cross-border. Especially if we want to make in India, then we need to be able to sort of ship faster. So I definitely see blockchain playing a role in all of this over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I also think that in supply chain is a definite use case for it. And given the amount of blockchain talent that we have, I think India should be leading that charge, whether it's on GST, whether a whole bunch of things, anywhere where a distributed ledger can be used, I think is a perfect application for it. There's a banker, Ashwin Balakrishnan of Barclays, who's asking a question that is blockchain absolutely foolproof against cyber attacks, and is data security 100% possible? Has there ever been an instance of an attempted cyber attack on a blockchain of which you are aware? So data security broadly about the blockchain, what do you think? How secure is it?
So, okay, let me start off, and I think Sahil can look at it from technical lens. So, there are two kinds of blockchains, right? There's proof of work and proof of stake blockchains. Now, when it comes to proof of work blockchain, you have two layers of security. One is you have the mining network, which has a certain amount of compute power. So therefore, you need to invest more than the compute power of the mining network in order to even be able to potentially hack the network. The second layer is that it's all cryptographically sealed. So the data would be pretty much garbage. So you'd need, especially if you're passing it over blockchain, you'd have a two-side cryptographic seal. So the data would be, basically stored also in a cryptographic format. So you need to hack the person who's even inputted the data. So it's incredibly complex. It is possible, but it's incredibly complex, and it's never really happened before. In the case of proof of work blockchains. Now, when it comes to proof of stake blockchains, they're slightly different. So proof of stake blockchains is what you use in a lot of private instances. And in proof of stake, we save the compute power and we move it to voting rights. So every node or every member of the network has the right to vote. So that is slightly less secure only because you don't need the compute power in order to sort of hack this network, but it is still complex because you need to hack pretty much a majority of the network. So it certainly wouldn't be as simple as hacking into a database.
Yeah.
So, and I know you've done some hack chains, Raunaq, you've run hack chains trying to get people to do sort of ethical hacking of blockchains, and hence you're a sort of expert on that concept. But it's good to know it's secure, because I think that in today's world is something that is, that is extremely, extremely important and concerning.
And maybe I'll just add one last point to that. So it's kind of like, when you buy these FMCG goods, they have this seal where it's like, if the seal is broken, don't buy, right? So it tells you this product has been tampered with. If you open the lid and it's been tampered with, you're like, don't buy. So blockchain is similar thing from a technical perspective, right? It's like, it's got a seal where even if the guy, let's imagine, has managed to hack it somehow, let's say he's the first person to do it, it will be recorded on the ledger that this is what happened. So participants can react instantly. Versus, with a lot of databases, you might have someone who's hacked into your database and you have no idea he's even there. Might be a snoop attack, might be ransomware, might be all kinds of stuff. With blockchain, that's incredibly hard to do.
Right. There's a lot of work that Elemential is doing in driving blockchain adoption in the financial services space. You worked with NSE, SEBI, NSDL, CAMS, ICICI Bank, others. Blockchain seems to be naturally suited for the BFSI sector, whether it's your banks, whether insurance companies, whether it's market intermediaries, even regulators. Blockchain has uses everywhere. Could you please share some details about the use cases, a couple of high-level use cases in the financial services sector, including KYC, including trade finance, including anything else that both of you find interesting? Because we have lots of people from the BFSI sector on this call: credit, insurance, banks, etc.
Yeah, so I'll let Sahil lead this one. I'll probably just start off with a bit of my view on it. So I think, blockchain's very first use case being Bitcoin. Bitcoin itself was a BFSI use case, right? It was a payments use case. So therefore, the very first translatable enterprise version of it happened to be in payments. So the very first, I'd say, enterprise blockchain implementation was probably Ripple, where it was enabling cross-border transactions. And in the BFSI space, you have a lot of regulations. So therefore, you need to be very safe, and they value security a lot. Everyone does, but BFSI needs to have that seal. And they also have a lot of complex processes and intermediaries. So blockchain just happens to suit that industry really well because it was designed to get rid of those problems. And yes, we've done a lot of work with a bunch of BFSI players. Sahil can probably get into some of the use cases that we've sort of accomplished.
Yeah.
Sahil, please.
Yeah, so in fact, with the Digital Lenders Association of India, we actually worked on a use case a while back to help mitigate the credit risk involved with borrowers over-leveraging themselves. So here, when a borrower approaches a lender, the lender needs to be sure that this borrower has not leveraged himself to his limit with other lenders. Only then he can decide whether the underwriting this loan is prudent or not. And for this, he's going to need access to the borrower's loan information. Now, there are borrowers that would want to intentionally over leverage themselves. And so lenders can't simply trust the loan information provided by the borrowers themselves. So here, this is where companies like CRISIL come in. Now, what CRISIL does is it collates all of the loan information from lenders and shares it with the other lenders so that they can make their underwriting decisions better.
Not so much CRISIL, but CRISIL, yeah, but the credit bureaus, CIBIL, etc. The credit bureaus are the ones that get all the bank data and pull it out. We've done some fair bit of work in that bureau space, so absolutely. I just wanted to add to that.
Yeah. So credit bureaus in general. Now the need for these bureaus basically arises because lenders don't want to share business information with each other. It's business sensitive info, and which is why they need a trusted third party, which the credit bureaus provide for them. And there's of course a lot of cost involved in using their services, and they are also a point of attack or a point of failure for the lender's data. Now, using blockchain as a network for these lenders, they can all connect to each other and share this loan information with each other. If you're talking about information that is not critically business sensitive, they can simply push it to the blockchain. And any member from these lenders can access this information when required. The benefit of using a blockchain here is that you can track who has accessed whose data and when. So there is complete traceability for the data in that sense. And there's also accountability, which is a lot more important here for data provided by lenders. So if a lender is pushing incorrect data about a borrower, he is going to be on the hook for that. Now, we come to the larger question of what about business sensitive data? I'm talking about the personally identifiable information or PII for borrowers. Now, this is going to be required because I need to identify the borrower to be able to know his loan information. But if I am going to make this publicly available to lenders, there is the risk of solicitation of customers from one lender to the other. So how do we deal with this? A natural solution to this that we explored with the Digital Lenders Association was putting hashes of the borrower's PII onto the blockchain. Now, when I put hashes, this data is completely encrypted and looks like gibberish. So I put these hashes along with the loan information. So even if other lenders can access or read this information, there is no way for them to be able to identify the borrowers and contact them. But when a borrower legitimately is approaching a lender, then this lender already has that borrower's PII. And now he can hash this PII, give it as input to the smart contract. And the smart contract runs it against all the existing blockchain records and returns the relevant loan information. So what we're ensuring because of these smart contracts is that data is exposed only to the extent it needs to be. So this was one use case where we saw a lot of value coming from blockchain in the BFSI space. There was another one which was very similar, which we did for the NSE a few years back for the Trades platform. This was a bill discounting platform.
Trade receivable exchange. Yeah.
Yes. So essentially, this was built so that lenders could bid on invoices to fund them, and borrowers get a chance to shop for the best interest rates.
Right.
One fundamental problem with bill discounting, in fact, even outside of Trades, has been double discounting.
Correct.
Where a business could shop for discounting his invoice, the same invoice, twice from different lenders. And you can see the parallels here. Unless lenders know that the invoice has been discounted by somebody else, there is no way for them to be safe from this risk. So blockchain can be used in a very similar way to the Digital Lenders Association use case and the double discounting issue.
Any use cases in insurance
These were like more risk.
Sorry.
So, and I'd like to maybe mention one more use case which we had done for .x. This is an NSE company and it was the largest KRA. And they won the CKYC project. And, that was a very non-traditional use case in the sense that we use blockchain as sort of killing two birds with one stone, and I'll explain how. So one issue CKYC had in the early days was that it was one central point of failure, and several banks, because obviously it was a very highly demanded service, several banks were hitting the service at the same time, which was causing a very slow query speed and, very bad service at certain points. So what they wanted to figure out is how can they enable these banks and FIs to have a local copy of this data? Because if they were to just give them the data, A, it's a lot of data, it'd be very expensive. And B, how do you know they haven't tampered with it? And how do you know they're not messing with this sensitive information? So what we did with blockchain is we essentially stored the metadata on the chain and allowed participants to have a node which they could query locally. So therefore, the network started scaling horizontally because you didn't need one player to build all the infra. Every player could host just a small piece of infra and get instant access to this data. And because of the audit trail of blockchain, you're pretty much assured that it's not going to be tampered with. So that was one very non-traditional use case. And it turned out to be pretty successful because A, it increased query speeds across the board. And B, is it also it lowered the disaster recovery cost for the CKYC database. So that was a pretty successful pilot. And we had 9 banks participating in it, as well as some firms as well. So that was a pretty interesting one for BFSI.
Anything in insurance?
So I know that in insurance, yeah, Sahil, you had something to say?
No, please go on. I'll add to it.
So I know that in insurance, the claims process is one which has a lot of documentation and has various independent parties that need to verify stuff, right? So, I mean, I recently had to make a claim because I had a damaged laptop. And I just observed how the process, even for a laptop, there's so many different independent agencies involved in verifying that what I'm saying is truthful. And so therefore, using a blockchain again to create just a good trail of data, which doesn't need as much reconciliation amongst the parties and you can trust the source, it would add a lot of value in the claims process. And I know that a lot of insurers have been experimenting with blockchain in that capacity.
Right. As you know, both of you know that Rubix Data Sciences operates in the area of B2B risk management. In fact, we do quite some work with trades as well in terms of, ensuring the or assessing the risk and monitoring the risk of the parties on the platform, the trades platform. But in the area of B2B risk management, what we're essentially doing is assessing and monitoring credit risk, supplier risk, and compliance risk of our customers' counterparties. So our customers' counterparties, we are assessing. We have several CFOs and risk heads on the call today, and they would love to understand, as would we, how blockchain can help in risk management.
Yeah.
So I'd like to start off and then Sahil can get into some use cases that we have in mind. One thing that I think is very applicable that blockchain offers that's useful in risk management is the ability to connect data without needing to share data, right? This is bringing the point that Sahil made about real-time verification. Why is that possible? Because I don't need to sit and give you a copy of my data and receive your copy of data and make sure that it's the same, because there's a ledger sitting making sure everything's at the same state. And, one way to visualize this is imagine an Excel sheet, right? And it could have several tabs of data. Let's say you have access to one tab and you can write a formula in one cell, but that formula can apply across any tab of data. So without you actually needing to get the data from the other tab, you can make a calculation on it and you can arrive at a conclusion instantaneously, right? So even if that data is updated in the other sheet, you get an instant update on your sheet. So it's just through smart contracts, it has a way of just connecting data without needing to share it, which I think makes risk far more real time, risk management far more real time, So I think that is one paradigm of how blockchain will eventually apply to risk management.
Yeah. So in fact, risk whole analogy that Raunaq gave right now of this Excel sheet for different tabs. To boil it down to one sentence, what blockchain is doing here is getting rid of the entire need for reconciliation. This, in fact, has been a very popular opinion whenever we've spoken to anybody from the CA profession. You know, getting rid of reconciliation entirely. And this happens because you're verifying data in real time as you write. The need for reconciliation arises only because I could write to my copy, you write to your database, and before we finally come to a consensus, I will need to verify your copy, you will need to verify mine. But with blockchain, because we're verifying before we write or as we write, we know that we are going to be in agreement no matter what, and that's what a smart contract ensures here, because it's running simultaneously on my system and yours, and we know it is the exact same code. Now, there's another use case. So I spoke about a couple of use cases with credit risk, in fact, the Digital Lenders Association and the TREDS use case. But there's another one around valuation control that has been a fun thought exercise for us as well internally when exploring risk management for blockchain. In fact, risk management has been one of my favorite use cases when it comes to blockchain. So after the market crash of 2008, regulators have wanted trading institutions to keep a tighter check on their traders. And basically, they expect their control teams to figure out prevalent market rates, apply them into a formula, and understand the risk associated with the trades that these companies are making. For instance, JP Morgan. And here today, so we've actually spoken to members of these control teams. And what we found out is that today these rates are obtained from brokers not involved in the transactions. And this happens over a phone call or chat. It is that unorganized. And literally screenshots of these chats go into reports that have to go to regulators or logs of these phone calls. Now, the reason this is so, there is no organized mechanism is because, this information is business sensitive to both the brokers and the trading institutions. Brokers don't want to make their rates publicly available, and institutions definitely do not want to give away their exposure to certain assets, because that is what will end up happening when they ask for the rate of a certain asset. They are inadvertently giving away their exposure in that asset. So, a very fun exercise, and that was pretty fruitful when we did this hypothetical exercise of figuring out how blockchain can be used. We saw that I could put up hashes and ever-changing hashes of assets with their rates on the blockchain. Now the brokers are okay putting these rates because the underlying asset remains hidden, as well as the trading institution.
Voice cut out. The underlying asset remains what? The voice cut out.
The underlying asset remains hidden.
Okay.
Yeah. And for the trading institutions as well, they are now simply using a smart contract to search across data on a blockchain. And they are simply comparing hashes. So when they are asking for this data, they're asking an impartial computer program for this data. The brokers at the other end have no idea which asset is being queried. So data is not being exposed. Like Raunaq mentioned, you're working on data without exposing data. And that to me is the beauty of blockchain here. So you can, and in fact, as opposed to screenshots of chats and phone logs, you have actual accountable, verifiable data coming from these brokers on the blockchain, as well as what trade information that the trading institutions have done, and that is on the blockchain as well. So when these reports are given to regulators, they can trust these reports a lot more, and the compliance risk goes really low here. This to me is another place where blockchain really shines.
Right. Lots of senior folks on the call listening in, thinking about how blockchain can be used in their areas. But, when companies want to build a solution which is a blockchain based for their problem, whether it's supply chain, whether it's what have you, what are some of the things that they should keep in mind while architecting a robust solution? So essentially, what are some of the common pitfalls in blockchain projects that you've come across that, the participants on this call should avoid?
So I think number one is probably just picking the right use case. I think for a lot of companies, blockchain doesn't necessarily apply in a way that, let's say, you could accomplish the same use case through a database. I think it's important to look at a use case that involves some sort of networked process, right? It has to be like in supply chain, maybe it's letter of credit, bill of lading. In the case of trade receivables, we're seeing it's double discounting, right? So how can sharing or at least exposing your data to a network in some way either lower your cost or make your operations more efficient? There are several internal use cases of blockchain, but they only apply with very sort of large operations. And they're not adding as much value as if it was a network use case. Because we have to remember, like, blockchain does not apply to everything. It was invented so that you could operate in a trustless environment. You could operate in an environment without knowing the other parties and without exposing your data or your identity to the other parties, but you could still trust them. Right? So I think it's important to pick the right use case. And I think it's important to establish a working group early on and not try and push your technology on everybody else, because it's a network use case at the end of the day. So there are a lot of organizations like Linux Foundation, where we are a member, and they have technologies like Hyperledger, which is a famous blockchain framework. And, they are very instrumental in helping you manage a working group and ensuring that there's enough knowledge share going on, and that the technology is, it's owned by everyone, rather than it being one company's stack or one bank stack and expecting everybody else to join. We've seen a whole lot of that. I mean, and then at that point, it's just a database, because if it's your blockchain and you have all the nodes and you're just asking others to put their data in, then it's just a database. So I think the use case and setting up a working group early on will point most organizations in the right direction. Sahil, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think some very good points business-wise. I'm going to touch some technical aspects of this. When you're once you know that you have a use case that is going to benefit from blockchain, it's important to even figure out what benefits of blockchain do you want to use for your use case. For instance, not every use case is going to require everything from consensus to the audit trail. When you think of blockchain, the most popular image that comes to mind is the Bitcoin blockchain. And there, yes, all the characteristics of blockchain that we hear about are all essential for the Bitcoin blockchain. They may not be for your use case. And it's important to break down the benefits you require and break down the characteristics of the blockchain and see which ones will give you the benefits you need. For instance, for a use case that simply needs an immutable audit trail, you have solutions like Quantum DB from AWS, which is an append-only data store. That's it. That's the only property of blockchain it embodies. But it's perfect for your use case if all you need is an immutable audit trail. You don't need to build an entire network. You don't need to spend on R&D to figure out an entire network when all you need is that data store. Then apart from this, it's also important to understand that your entire application is never going to run on the blockchain. Like, only parts of your application that require these characteristics of blockchain will. For everything else, you will use centralized technology, because centralized technology will do certain things better than distributed technology always. For example, throughput. And I'll actually take an example here. With e-voting, the entire system that's serving the shareholders does not lie on the blockchain. In fact, we aren't going to put text of the resolution on the blockchain. In fact, the entire application that serves the shareholders will be a server sitting on the backend on AWS or NHDL servers, and only the parts of collection and counting of the votes and assigning and verifying the proxies, that is going to lie on the blockchain.
Right.
So architecture and design here becomes really important.
Right. So I think, understanding, from just summarizing, understanding the use case well and whether it needs blockchain. Second is putting together a working group, a cross-functional working group, so that, everyone's on the same page as to whether it can happen. And third is what you said, Sahil, architecting it appropriately. I think those would be three things that you would recommend to someone before, they take up blockchain. There is there are several questions, but there is a question from Mr. Santosh Khadagade, who says that given its inherent advantages, where can one start learning about blockchain so we can evaluate how we can integrate it into our business processes? And I think that's a good point, right? I mean, everyone wants to know, where do we get started? Whom do we speak with when we are starting a blockchain process? So, I mean, where would you point people who want to know more about it, who may not be, technical, but who want to understand the business uses, etc.? Where would you point them to know more about it?
So I'd say that one company that has done a lot of work in knowledge share and making blockchain very simple to understand from a non-technical perspective is R3. It's a New York-based company, and they also operate their own blockchain network called Corda. Their CTO, Richard General Brown, has a very nice blog which just explains the technical aspects and helps you understand what it is and what can you use it for, what is it not useful for. And then they also have their head of research, Anthony Lewis, who's got a blog called Bits on Blocks. And that is the best, frankly, that's the best resource when it comes to understanding what the use cases are. Because it helps you understand from first principles what it is and very quickly and simply gets you up to speed there.
Right.
I read a bunch of the books in the space, but a lot of them are fairly just filled,
Right, right. There is a very interesting question from Mr. Ajay. And the question that Ajay is asking is that the technology seems clearly beneficial for India's governance processes. So whether, example, property, land title registration, and so on, it will make the process transparent and less prone to manipulation or corruption. So is there a major interest that is being shown by governments, whether state government or central governments, and by the Niti Aayog for implementing blockchain to improve governance and ease of doing business? I thought it's a good broad question for both of you.
Yeah, I think Niti Aayog, in their vision, the first use case they've looked at is land records. And I think the AP government has already implemented blockchain for some of their agricultural land records. Again, the benefit here being that you have an immutable trail of ownership and you don't need to present paper documents and there's no forgery that can happen. So just making governance a lot simpler.
Yeah. In fact, yeah, I'd say in India, by far, the AP state government has done the most in terms of blockchain.
So Andhra Pradesh has done the most, is what you're saying.
And in fact, yeah, you could say Vizag's been the capital for blockchain in India. And yeah, so they've done, we spoke about the Department of Fisheries project with Tata Trust, the land records project that they've done. They've run a couple of hackathons that have given a lot of students and researchers the chance to, explore use cases with the government where blockchain can be involved. The government is opening up to it for sure.
Well, that's good to know, because I think, given the many advantages that both of you have talked about, I think it is imperative that we do it. And as Ajay suggested, land is a classic case, right? So if AP can do it, Andhra Pradesh can do it, so can everyone else. I think that's if they want to, that is. So that's obviously a corollary or a caveat there. Raunaq, your product is, there is a great product, a quote by you, Raunaq, explaining what Elemential does to make blockchains work. And it says, blockchain orchestration and management is a fundamental challenge in the blockchain ecosystem. That's a roadblock to scalable implementations. With Elemential's middleware product, Hadron, our focus is to make managing a blockchain network an easy process with a short learning curve. The Jeff Bezos of the blockchain world will build his product using Elemential. This goal keeps us on our toes. I think it's a fab goal, by the way. So can you tell us in simple words what Hadron does and how it helps to manage the blockchain successfully?
Yeah, so that is certainly a long-term vision. When we started off, blockchain was not stable at all. So, if you literally wanted to deploy any use case, you'd be lucky if your blockchain lasted more than a day when you're deploying a private instance. So therefore, the first product we built, our product Hadron, it did one simple thing, which is just created a cache layer around your blockchain in a decentralized way, right? So it stored whatever the latest data was, so that if your chain were to go down, it can instantly spin it back up again. So this actually helped a lot of our customers who wanted to try out use cases with sensitive data actually give it a go, right? And eventually we've actually scaled to a whole broad suite of administrative tools for developers. And it's enabled our sort of customers to manage blockchain and the node management very seamlessly. Without necessarily needing to hire new talent, they can just basically use the tools and their talent will already be up to date. So that's kind of the whole idea in mind for Hadron.
Right, right, right. I think you guys are doing a fabulous job. I know we have lots of questions. We are running out of time. So I'm going to end with this question, which, as an Indian, we should all be concerned with, or as a citizen of any democracy. In India, we are fortunate that technology comes naturally to us. The Election Commission in February announced that it is working with IIT Chennai to develop a blockchain system that will allow voters registered in any part of the country to exercise their franchise even after they move cities. South Korea is experimenting with blockchain voting. I know, as we mentioned earlier on the call, Elemential has done a lot of work in the area of e-voting with NSDL and SEBI, etc. Do you think a few years from now we can vote safely and securely from the comfort of our homes and be good citizens in our vibrant and thriving democracy?
I think voting has to go digital. Like, I think, I don't know why it hasn't as yet, but it has to go digital. I think blockchain will be a key piece in its architecture when it comes to just ensuring it's immutable and it cannot be tampered with. I think, yeah, over the next 5 years, we're definitely going to have some sort of digital voting system with blockchain at the back end. And we're already seeing, like, with the use case we implemented at NSDL, there is certainly a lot of interest on behalf of regulators. So, and I know the Electoral Commission has been looking at this technology for a while. And after reading the Niti Aayog vision statement about how they want blockchain to be a key part of governance in India, I'm pretty confident that over the next 5 years, we'll start to see voting from our phone in a way that is trustworthy.
So someone just asked me, that was going to be my final question, but someone just reminded me that they had sent in a question, which, and which we should talk about. What are, one of the key uses of blockchain is the creation of smart contracts. And the person is asking, can you please tell us what smart contracts are and how they work? So that's going to be my final question. While you're answering that, either of you, both of you, Raunaq, if you could just put up on the chat the name of the blogs you mentioned, if you could just key it, and a lot of people asking about that as well, that they would like the name of the blog so they can make a note of it.
Sure.
But smart contracts, yes.
Yeah, so smart contracts essentially are just it's just code that runs on the blockchain. So like any piece of code, it takes in an input, it runs when a certain event triggers it, and it gives you an output after processing the input. But there is a very fundamental difference between traditional code and smart contracts, and that is in the way that these are executed. So a smart contract, once written and deployed to the blockchain, is then just like the data on the blockchain, it cannot be modified or deleted. And this ensures that, what I expect the code to do, the code is going to do. But it doesn't stop there. Now, when this code runs, code of a smart contract, just picture it like any other piece of code, but it's in a distributed system. It's running on my machine, it's running on Kaushal's machine, and it's running on Raunaq's machine at the same time. And only if the output that all three pieces of code gave is identical, only then will it be accepted as a result. This means that if Kaushal has tampered with his piece of code to create a result that he wants, that's not going to match what comes out as my output and is not going to be accepted. So unless and until the pieces of code here are exactly the same, we are not going to be able to write this to the blockchain. in fact, if you understand the nature of smart contracts better, you'll even understand why they're called so. This smart contracts are just code, which is a contract between all the members of the blockchain. And I call it a contract because you are all agreeing to the terms of what the code is supposed to do and how it is supposed to do it. And once agreed, this has to be enforced just like a contract. And this code is smart enough to enforce its own terms on all participants because it verifies the results in real time across all participants. So it's essentially a smart contract between all members of the blockchain.
Right. Okay. I think that explains it very, very clearly. So thank you very much. Raunaq, Sahil, it is such a pleasure having both of you on this chat. Thank you for answering our questions that all our participants had. I think what you guys have achieved at such a young age is incredible. As Raunaq said, with Niti Aayog talking about how blockchain is going to change governance in India, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of you, if not on webinars and on the television channels when democracy goes the blockchain way. But we are very, very, we'll be in your corner rooting for you. I'm sure you guys are going to make a great success of Elemential. Keep all your marquee investors and small investors happy. So, good luck to all of you for this. I want to a quick shout out to my colleague Vidhi Kapoor, who is an intern with us, Raunaq, and she had put together some of the questions for this. So, the power of youth. And thank you again. Next week, we're going to be doing our 9th session in the Rubix Knowledge Series, and that's going to be on export credit insurance with Mr. Subir Das, the General Manager of ECGC, Export Credit Guarantee Corporation Limited. So you'll hear more details from me and from Rubix in the next couple of days about the timing of that session. So stay tuned. Once again, Raunaq, Sahil, thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you, Kaushal.
Keep it going. All right. Thanks. Bye.